Hare Krishna. Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the second chapter, contents of the Gita summarized, verse number 54. The verse 54 to 72 tell us about the qualities of a liberated soul. So the first verse in this section, 54 verse, Arjuna is asking, Arjuna uvacha stita pragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stitadhi kim prabhasheta kimasita vrajeta kim. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit and how does he walk? Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. As there are symptoms for each and every man, in terms of his particular situation, similarly, one who is Krishna conscious has his particular nature, talking, walking, thinking, feeling, etc. As a rich man has his symptoms by which he is known as a rich man, as a diseased man has his symptoms by which he is known as diseased, or as a learned man has his symptoms, so a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms in various dealings. One can know his specific symptoms from the Bhagavad Gita. Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks, for speech is the most important quality of any man. It is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak, and certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. The immediate symptom of a Krishna conscious man is that he speaks only of Krishna and of matters relating to him. Other symptoms then automatically follow as stated below. So in this verse, Arjuna is basically asking 4 questions of a self-realized soul. Or in other words, you can say Jivan Mukta. So first question is, Arjuna says, Ka Bhasha. The literal meaning of this is, what is his language? But the implied meaning is, what are his general symptoms? Stita Pragya, what are the general symptoms by which we can recognize a Stita Pragya, a liberated soul? And the question number 2 is, Kim Prabhasheta, how does he speak? That is the literal meaning. So the first was, how do we recognize such a person? The second question is, how does he speak? The literal meaning of Kim Prabhasheta is, the first question, Ka Bhasha, is what is his language? Bhasha means language, but the implied meaning is, how can we recognize such a person? Kim Prabhasheta, the implied meaning is, how does he speak? But the literal meaning is, Prabhasha is one on receiving praise or blame. What will he say internally and what will he say externally? When he receives affection or hate, raga, dvesha, 2 sides of the same coin, what will he say internally and what will he say externally? The third question is Kim Asita. The literal meaning is how does he sit? But the implied meaning is how does he restrain his senses from the sense objects? As we know, we have 5 gyanendriya, the 5 sense organs, the sense of seeing, the sense of hearing, the sense of taste, touch and smell, and so on. So these sense organs are like wild horses. Imagine you are in a chariot with wild horses, and if you don't restrain those horses, they will be running all over the place. They will be creating a havoc. So one has to restrain his senses. So Arjuna is asking Kimasita, which means how does such a person, a liberated soul, self-realized soul, how does he restrain his senses? And the 4th question is Kim Rajeta, how does he walk? That's a literal meaning, but the implied meaning here is how does he respond to the sense objects? So the first is he restrains the sense objects, and then how does he respond to those sense objects? So that was verse number 54. So Lord answers to Arjuna's questions in the next verse number 55. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanyevatmana tushta stita prajnastadochyate. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Purport: the Bhagavatam affirms that any person who is fully in Krishna consciousness or devotional service of the Lord has all good qualities of the great sages, whereas a person who is not so transcendently situated has no good qualification, because he is sure to be taking refuge in his own mental concoctions. Consequently, it is rightly said herein that one has to give up all kinds of sense desire manufactured by mental concoction. Artificially, such sense desires cannot be stopped. But if one is engaged in Krishna consciousness, then automatically sense desire subsides without extraneous efforts. Therefore, one has to engage himself in Krishna consciousness without hesitation. For this devotional service will instantly help one onto the platform of transcendental consciousness. The highly developed soul always remains satisfied in himself by realizing himself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. Such a transcendently situated person has no sense desires resulting from petty materialism. Rather, he remains always happy in his natural position of eternally serving the Supreme Lord. So Krishna answers Arjuna's 4 questions, saying that Arjuna was asking how does one recognize a sthita pragya, a self-realized soul. So Krishna says he gives up all material desires. Material desires, we know, are like wildfire, and satisfying those material desires is like pouring butter onto the fire. What happens when you pour butter onto the fire blazes more, even more. So don't ever commit the mistake of satisfying your sense objects, because they by default can never be satisfied. So a person, a wise person who is self-realized knows that, and therefore he has given up hankering after material desires. Then these material desires that arise in the mind, and he is satisfied in the self. A person, a realized soul, is satisfied in himself, meaning the Paramatma in himself, the super soul, which is the God. He is happy being with that super soul. He is happy serving that super soul or Paramatma or Bhagawad. And such a person is always situated in pure consciousness and is a sthita pragya. So his number one, his mind is withdrawn from the sense objects. Number two, he is satisfied by the soul. The soul's very nature is bliss, Sat Chit Ananda. So he is satisfied in his soul, which is bliss, and therefore Atmana Tushta is the word that's used here. Hope that you understood something and benefited in some way. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.